Hi, this is PD at BurgZerg Arcade at BurgZergArcade.com, and this is tutorial number 117. We're just going to continue on with our last tutorial, and I'll just open up Unity and mono develop. Alright, so we've got our loop window actually displaying on screen, and now we want to actually start putting stuff in that window. And the stuff I want to put in the window is, well, basically the icon representation of the items that are in that chest. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to put a line between my private and public, and I'm going to create another private, and this type is going to be list, but we want to typecast the list, so we're going to have to use the generics. So we'll use system.collections.generics. This will give us access to it, and then when we come down here we can type list. And make sure you select the one with the greater than less than signs. Then inside of here, we want to put type item. And that didn't work. There we go. Now what this does is it tells the program that this list is only going to contain items. And if you remember when we were creating our weapons and our jewelry and our armor, all of them eventually were derived from item. So basically anything that was eventually tracked back to the item class, the base class, can be added to this list. And I'm just going to call it underscore loot items. So I'm going to come down to my start and I'm going to initialize that. So I'm going to say loot items is equal to new list items. Or item, and don't forget the parentheses on the end. Great, so now we have a place to actually store the items that we're going to be getting. Let's create a little dummy function that just basically creates a bunch of fake items and puts them in that list. So I'm going to come down right below the loop window, and I'm going to create a private function which doesn't return anything. I'm just going to call it populate. And all I want to do here is create a for loop, and we'll say int cnt is equal to 0, cnt is less than, and I'm just going to start off with 25 items. And we'll want to make sure we increase the counter. And then down here I can just say list, whoops, I didn't call it list, I called it loot items. And we're going to use .add. And what this does is actually just adds an item to this list. And what we're going to add is just a new item, which is just an empty item. Later on, when we will create our script that will generate random items for us, and we can use the random item that it creates and add that in here instead. So there we go. We'll want to make sure we call this function. We'll do it right after we assign it. So we'll put it up here. So when it starts up, it's going to create the list for us, and then it's going to throw in 25 fake items. So let's go down here and display those items. Now displaying the items is pretty easy because we can just iterate through our list of items and just tell it to put them out in some format. I'm going to be using a GUI button for that format. So we'll say int cnt again is equal to 0, as long as cnt is less than loot items dot, and we'll want count, which is the number of items in this list, and then cnt plus plus to iterate it. And I'll put my little curly braces, and to start off with, I'm just going to actually put the button down. I'm not going to bother adding any functionality to the button besides just displaying it. So we'll add the button. The button's going to want a new rect. Now we should define how big we want these buttons. Since these are going to be inventory buttons, which are going to be the exact same as the buttons in our inventory, and also the exact same size as the buttons in our spell bar, I'm actually going to go ahead and come up here and define how big I want those buttons to be. So we'll make public float, And I'm just going to call it button width, and I'll make that equal to 40. And I'm also going to make a public float button height, and I'm going to have mine be 40 as well. So obviously, if you want yours to be different shapes, maybe longer than it is high, you can change these values. So I'm going to come down here, and first thing it's going to want is a new rect. And when we're creating our new rect, it's going to want to know exactly where we're going to put the first button, or where we're going to put where this button is going to start. Since we're iterating through a loop here of buttons, we're going to want to use that CNT variable we have, but we're also going to want to add or multiply it by our button width. So I'm going to take button width, I'll just copy it, I'll paste it in here, and I'm going to multiply it by CNT. So this way here, every button is 40 pixels over more, which is the width of my button. So now it wants to know how far from the top we're going to put it. And for now, I'm just going to say 0, but I know eventually I'm going to want to move it down, but again, it's going to depend on the graphics you're using. You're going to want to change that to your own personal style and taste. But for now, I'll put a 0 there. Now it wants to know how wide it's going to be, and that's easy because we have a value for it, or a variable, button width, and then its height, which of course is button height. Okay, so we've got our rect done now. So when you hit comma, it's going to tell you that the next thing it wants is a GUI content if you wish to put it there. Before that, though, you can actually define a name, and right now I'm actually going to use that. And what I wanted to do is just say cnt.toString, which is just going to output the number according to what iteration we're at. So the first time it goes through, it's going to label my button as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So we got that done. I'm not going to assign a GUI content yet, and I'm just going to end it right there. So let's save that off. We'll go back into Unity, and we'll make sure there's no errors. There's none. So let's start it up and take a look how it goes. So as you can see, we got all our buttons along the top here. There should be 25 total, but since it starts off at 0, it should go up to number 24. And you notice 21, it's cut off a bit, and it is way too high. I don't really like that. But I'm not going to worry too much about positioning the buttons themselves, because what we want to do is add that little slider at the bottom. And we can do that by using the scroll view. So let's go back into MonoDevelop. And it looks like we only actually have a couple minutes left. So I'm going to save the scroll view for the next tutorial. I'll see you then, and I'll start the next tutorial. Bye-bye.